Dear daughter, I'm writing this like a diary entry because I don't know what love will look like when you grow up. I want you to have my words so that if I'm not here one day, you can remember the importance of being free in your relationships. Today, I want to talk about something that may seem subtle but can erode your peace. There's a moment I went through that felt harmless but left deep scars. I was sitting at the table, talking about simple plans. He smiled, but there was something in the way he looked at me that made me hesitate. And then, when I mentioned that I needed space, he fell silent. It wasn't a comfortable silence, it was a heavy silence. The air grew denser and I felt my heart race. The conversation that should have been easy turned into a minefield. In that moment, I realized the cruel truth. That silence was not respect. It was a form of control. I wasn't free. I was caught in a cycle of anxiety, trying to guess each reaction, every nuance in his gaze. This was not the definition of love. Healthy love should not be intertwined with fear. Love should comfort, not torment. The rule I want to pass on to you is simple yet fundamental. Pay attention to the signs. If you say no, and the response is a cold withdrawal, that is not love. That is a form of manipulation. Words may be sweet, but actions speak louder. What you need to understand is that discomfort is not normal. Feeling anxious every day is not a price you should pay for someone's affection. Remember this: true love brings peace, not torment. If a no makes the air tense, you need to reevaluate that relationship. You deserve a love that doesn't require constant sacrifices to maintain peace. If anyone ever makes you feel guilty for needing space or for asserting your needs, know that this is not love. It's a sign, and you must listen. You deserve a love that doesn't require constant sacrifices to maintain peace. And when I say that, it's because at a moment of weakness, I set aside my needs out of fear of that coldness. His silence became a monster I created myself. I convinced myself that his reactions were normal, that I was being too sensitive. But deep down, a voice whispered that something was wrong. One day I was watching a movie I always loved, something light and fun. As the characters laughed, I looked at him beside me and noticed that his gaze was distant. His body was present, but his mind seemed to drift off to another dimension. It was as if my joy were in a gas chamber, about to be suffocated. The laughter that should have been contagious was cut short by the shadow of his indifference, and instead of feeling free to share that happiness, I shrank back. I asked if he was okay, and the response was simply a flat yes. My heart sank, and there I was again, trying to justify the unjustifiable. What was so wrong with my joy that made this person pull away? I started to question my worth. This is what happens when you allow yourself to succumb to an unhealthy relationship. I was no longer living. I was just existing, waiting for the return of a connection that never really existed. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A friend invited me to dinner. That night I laughed. I laughed like I hadn't in months. Conversations flowed like water, and the lightness finally returned to my soul. In the midst of the laughter, something inside me began to stir. The memory of his silence, the discomfort, emerged like a shadow. But this time, instead of enclosing me, it awakened me. When I got home, the darkness felt more palpable. He was there, and I knew the air between us was thick with unasked questions. "How was your night?" he asked, with a tone that revealed his disdain. I felt a wave of indignation mixed with sadness. I no longer needed to justify my laughter. I no longer needed to ask for permission to live. And in that moment, I spoke the truth. No embellishments, no excuses. It was incredible. I felt light and happy. The words came out like gunshots. He fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the pressure I had grown accustomed to. It was an emptiness, a space where truths could exist without fear. In that moment, I realized there was a strength within me, the strength to recognize that I am worthy of love that doesn't come with fears, that doesn't require me to lose parts of myself to please others. I held on to that truth like a beacon in the dark. It shone brightly, illuminating the gaps that doubt had left behind. True love is based on mutual respect and understanding. It shouldn't be a constant exchange of favors, where each no becomes a sharp knife. I began to understand that I deserved a love that celebrated my happiness, not one that tried to silence it. From that day forward, I made a decision. I chose to observe. I chose to listen to my instincts. If the air shifted, I would stop. If the words didn't align with the behavior, I would question them. Every little sign became a bright alert. And when confusion arose, I reminded myself, confusion is a sign. If I felt something was off, I wouldn't dismiss the feeling. Then, a new rule came into effect in my life. I would not negotiate my emotional worth. That feeling of freedom brought a lightness I hadn't known in years. Colors began to fill my life again. And so, dear daughter, if you ever find yourself in a space where love turns into emotional debt, remember that it is not your responsibility to carry the weight of others. Love should uplift, not annihilate. It should be a warm embrace, not a cold chain. If you feel guilty for asserting your boundaries, then it's time to reevaluate. You have the right to be respected, to be seen, to be heard. And if a love makes you doubt that, then that love needs to be questioned. Always, always choose freedom. If you remember just one thing from this journal, let it be this. Love should not come with conditions. Love is a safe space where you can be who you really are, without fear of the consequences. It's a place where you are celebrated, not silenced. One day, while walking through a park, I saw a mother with her young daughter. The little girl was jumping and laughing, carefree. The mother watched her with a genuine smile, as if each laugh were a victory. The scene froze me in place. It was a powerful echo of what I had lost. I remembered my own childhood, filled with moments like that, where love didn't carry burdens, and joy was simple. A wave of melancholy hit me. I wondered, where did I lose that lightness? Where did I stop being that child who danced to the sound of the wind, who didn't feel the need to ask for permission to be happy? The contrast between that girl's freedom and the emotional prison I was living in made me realize something vital. I had allowed the relationship to shape my reality, not the other way around. On that walk, the sun shone brightly, but I was wrapped in a cloud of doubts. It was the same way he looked at me, as if my light were blinding. It was as if I had become a reflection of the shadow he cast. When I looked at the sky and saw the clouds dissipating, I understood that I needed to make changes. I needed to reclaim my space, my shine. I decided it was time to explore this newfound strength within me. Through the discontent, through every silent tear I had shed, a fervent desire began to grow. A desire to be who I truly am, without masks, without adaptations. I wanted to feel the joy of carefree laughter, of authenticity again. Returning home, I realized that the walls of my room, which had once seemed oppressive, now reflected possibilities. I looked in the mirror and decided to take action. I needed to reconnect with my essence. I began to seek out small pleasures that had been lost along the way. Painting, dancing, even the simple act of writing. Each artistic expression became a shout for freedom, a reminder of those parts of me that had been forgotten. Art brought me back to a state of flow. Dance, which had once been a form of expression, transformed into a ritual of liberation. Each movement became a manifesto against the deafening silences. I danced as if no one were watching, allowing my feelings to flow like a river. This new understanding of love and boundaries became my anchor. Conversations with friends, which had once been filled with the fear of judgment, were now enriched by authenticity. I began to share my experiences, to open my heart. The more I spoke, the more I understood that I was not alone. Other women carried stories, similar shadows. Each account was a thread that intertwined, creating a network of support. It was in this renewed environment that I reached out to him again. There was a weight in my chest, a desire to clarify things, but this time I wouldn't speak like an employee delivering a report. I would do it with the confidence of someone who knows her worth. When we met, I felt the tension in the air. The words began to flow. My laughter is part of who I am. I'm not asking for permission. I'm just living. His expression was one of surprise. He wasn't used to seeing this strong side of me. The silence that followed was no longer oppressive. It was an open field for truth. As the days went by, I realized that the care we put into relationships must be mutual. Love needs to be a fertile ground, not a battleground. If a relationship starts to demand sacrifices from your essence, it becomes a burden instead of a blessing. The urge to please, to avoid conflict, has been replaced by the courage to be transparent, and it was this new version of myself that began to attract healthy connections. With each interaction, I learned to spot the signs. I learned to distinguish between those who respected my boundaries and those who tried to sidestep them. Over time, the concept of love began to take on new shapes. It was no longer a place of sacrifice, but a refuge of understanding. I surrounded myself with people who celebrated me, who were willing to dance under the same lights, rather than extinguishing the flame that burned within me. And so, dear daughter, if you ever find yourself caught in uncomfortable silences or love that demands your diminishment, always remember, you have the right to shine. Freedom is a precious treasure, and if someone tries to steal it, you must fight to reclaim it. You deserve to be loved for the entirety of who you are, with no restrictions, no reservations. True love does not hide, does not dim. It shines. Always choose to be free. One day, while I was walking in the park, something unexpected happened. I saw a group of children playing in the sun. They laughed, they ran, and on their faces was a joy so pure, so unpretentious that it made me stop. The sound of their laughter echoed like a reminder of everything I had allowed myself to lose. That innocence, that freedom. And I wondered, when did I stop being that child? Sitting on a bench, I observed every movement, every interaction. A girl stepped away from the group, just to dance alone, arms wide open, as if wanting to embrace the world. I saw myself in her, lost in my own internal melody, dancing without the fear of being judged. That moment brought an avalanche of feelings. I remembered how many times I hesitated to express my true essence, how much I succumbed to the fear of disapproval, to the weight of silence that I knew so well. The truth is, I had placed limitations on my own being, allowing someone else's gaze to shape my perception of who I was. I returned home wrapped in reflections. What could I do to reclaim that part of myself? That night, I picked up a notebook and wrote a letter to myself, a letter of forgiveness. I apologized for letting fear take the reins of my life, for not honoring my own voice. Each word was a liberation, a step toward reconnecting with my authenticity. The following week, I decided to reinvent myself. I started exploring new forms of expression. I signed up for dance classes, where each movement became a shout against the emotional oppression I had endured. I learned to feel every beat of the music as an extension of my own soul, and as I danced, I realized that each step represented a piece of me that was coming back. My gatherings with friends became sacred spaces. I shared my experiences without fear of judgment. And interestingly, as I opened my heart, I noticed that other women were also struggling with their own invisible chains. We began to create a support network where vulnerability became power. Each story was an echo of resilience, and together, we started to redefine what it meant to be free. In one of those conversations, my friend Anna shared a moment that changed her life. She talked about the day she decided to walk away from a toxic relationship. Her words resonated with me. I realized that the loneliness I felt by his side was far more painful than the loneliness of being alone. That sentence struck me like a lightning bolt. Yes, loneliness can be a burden, but often it's the clarity we need so much. I accompanied her on her journey of self-discovery, and in return, she helped me see my own strength. We spent hours talking about the signs we usually ignore, the little disappointments, the heavy silences, the unhealed wounds. With each conversation, I was reconfiguring the image of love in my mind. Love shouldn't be a bargain. Instead, it should be a safe space. Freedom expanded within me like an unstoppable fire, and gradually, the sun began to shine in my heart again. I was learning to love once more, not from the desire to please, but from the desire to be. In that same park, I saw the girl dancing again. This time, I couldn't help but smile. I finally understood. The dance of life was mine to live, and no one had the power to extinguish it.